Hey you, and welcome. In this video, we're going to work with user-specific data. So let's dive right into it. Now, let me show you what I mean. In our app currently, if I log in, I can see the contacts. However, these contacts are the same for everyone. That means whoever is using this app can see the contacts that I've added. Also, I can see their contacts. So it's not very user-specific. It's just a general collection of contacts. So we want to make it user-specific. All right. In order to do so, first things first, I have to store the user data in my cloud Firestore. So what I'm going to do, if I go back to Firefox, you see how we have a collection of contacts. I'm going to start a new collection of users, and every user that logs in, they will get their own user document. And inside that document, I will add their contacts rather than putting contacts on the root level. All right, let's do that. So I'll go back to VS Code. And in our auth context, that's where we are listening to auth change, and I can call setDoc here. So in order to store the data, we will just start with a reference. So user ref, call it doc, import that auto from Firebase Firestore, pass it DB, which is going to come from our utils Firebase. Yes. And then provide it with the collection name, so users in this case. And then we will provide it the ID. And the ID in this case will be the user.uid. Oh, not a string. Yeah, actually we have to take away the null that we did before and make it so that user will never be null. If there's no user, don't trigger rest of my code, just return early. So that will make it so that user ID is always truth. All right, next we have the reference already set. Let's go to setDoc function, which will be imported from Firebase Firestore as well. Pass it the ref and then await it and wait for user snapshot to come back. There we are. For setDoc, we have to provide it the data that we want to store. So I'll store two things from user. Let's destructure them. That would be a much easier way to read the code later on. So instead of user UID, I will destructure UID from here. I'll also destructure the email they log in with and display name. That should be enough to work with. So I'll pass email and display name down to Firestore. And using this user snapshot, I don't really think I need to wait it. But I'll await it anyways and I'll set it afterwards. So let's go ahead and save. Perfect. So as that happens, my browser has refreshed. So if I go to my Firestore, refresh the page, there we are. I can see the users collection has started and there is a ID assigned, which is the UID for the authenticated user. It will always be the same, and that's where I can see the person's name and email address. If I refresh this page again and refresh my Firestore, it doesn't add another entry. So setDoc is making sure that it's always the same entry, and if there's any changes to the email or display name, it will update that automatically. So that part is taken care of. Now we want to move contacts inside the user document. So let's see how we can do that. I'll go back to my VS Code and let's go to contact context. And notice in contact context, every time we want to write data is going to contacts collection. So first things first, let's move all of that, centralize it, and I'll call this up here a const and call it collection name. It will be called contacts, so keep it the same. So right now I'm just refactoring, I'm not making any changes, just making it so that it is all coming from one variable name. So that's for get contact by ID, add contact also has that, edit contact also has that, delete contact also has that, and handle fetch also has that. I think that's all the areas. Perfect. So if I go save and refresh my page, it should still work. So nothing is broken. That's perfect. Let's go ahead and refactor to make it so that it is going to a nested route rather than on the main level. So it's user specific. In order to do so, I will go back to auth context. And one thing I have to do is start providing user as one of the provider or context state. So I am saving that in the state here. I'll just pass it down. So copy user, and in my, oh, I haven't even wrapped it. All right. So auth context.provider. So this starts my provider. I'll pass the values down and it will be user value. I do have to document it, otherwise it won't really work. So if I scroll up, I mean, it would work, it's just going to complain about TypeScript. So let's start an interface up here, call it interface auth context props, and it will be a user that is an optional param or value, and is going to be a type of user from Firebase auth. This interface will be used over here in the create context, and if I scroll down, all the values should be satisfied. So I'll go ahead and save this. Now if I go back to contact context, I can use auth context in my contact context now. So let's do use context. This is coming from React. Use auth context and destructure out the user. And here I will do a string interpolation. And instead of starting with context, I'll say users slash, and it should have user.uid. And at this point, I can just opt out of TypeScript and say this route will not be rendered until there's a user. So definitely user will not be null, and I take full responsibility for that. So that's why I put exclamation mark here to take it out. And user UID context. So that should work. If I go ahead and save this right now, application restarts, and notice that contexts have disappeared. And the reason for that is because there are no contexts on the user specific level. And if I go to my Firestore, refresh the page, under users, there is a user, but there is no collection inside that user document. So let's go ahead and create a new contact, submit. And this contact should start showing up in a nested collection of users. So let's refresh. There we are, a context collection has started for this user specifically, and there is another document inside that collection. So I can add more users, submit, and that adds another user here. So this is a user specific collection at this point, and that should work. One more thing I want to do is notice when we add any new users, it's not really changing anything in my drawer. And the reason for that is because we don't fetch again. Once the creation has happened, we should trigger the fetch, or whenever the edit happens, we should trigger the fetch. So in these areas, let's go back to our VS Code and let's quickly do handle fetch, get contact by ID. No, not that one. But for when the add contact happens, before the return, I will call handle fetch. And same thing for edit. Right after await and delete, same thing, and that should do it. All right, perfect. So if I try adding a user now, submit, and if I go back, it should be added. Of course, it's not showing because that user is paginated. Otherwise, it will show up. All right, so I'll see you all in the next video.